you know?
Well, I mean, first of all, they shouldn't have had to prove anything because they were citizens. They were American citizens, and all the hardship that they went through, they just didn't talk about it, you know.
I don't remember, when I've asked him over the years, he was reluctant to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's because I'm sure like his parents didn't really speak about it very much, because it was something that they were happy to have made it out alive and to be given the opportunity. And what they said was, is that, despite all of that, America is still a great place, because they were able to start all over, build a successful business, move out of California, come here to Texas, and do something incredible.
And how did they end up in Texas? It says here that they founded the Tokyo Gardens in 1966. So tell us how that came to be.
So they did a number of things after the war, and in fact, they started a Chinese restaurant in LA. That one didn't work out.
Now it's like Chinese people open a lot of Japanese restaurants.
Yeah. In the early 60s, Japan Food Corporation, JFC, is like one of the largest distributors for Japanese and Asian food products in America. And they had a relationship with the president, who was in San Francisco at the time. And they said, we're opening up a distribution center in Texas. Why don't you go open up a restaurant? Because we'd like some customers. And so they decided to lean in and open a restaurant in Dallas. And so the first one was actually in Dallas in 1962, and that was the first sushi bar in Texas. And you would think that you must be absolutely crazy to do that. Like, why would you open a Japanese restaurant in Texas? You're in California, there's plenty of Japanese restaurants there. And it's kind of like that old joke about the shoe salesman who goes to Africa, and I won't tell it because it's outdated, but it's exactly why, there aren't any Japanese restaurants in Texas. So let's be the first and do something incredible. So they opened in 62 in Dallas, 66 in Houston, and ended up opening several other restaurants around the country. But the largest one was here in Houston, called Tokyo Gardens.
And tell us where it was located. And it wasn't just like a strip center you went into a restaurant, but it was like an experience.
Yeah. So Tokyo Gardens was on Westheimer, and this was on the outskirts of town. It was right on Westheimer and 610.
So far away. Out the country.
And back then Westheimer was a 2-lane road. So that's how you have to if you can imagine it. It was an old Chevrolet dealership. So it was actually a really big space. They gutted the whole thing, flew in Japanese architects and builders to design and construct the space inside to look like a traditional Japanese built wooden frame construction home or building. There was a koi pond in the middle. They had Japanese koi fish, the colorful, they look like large goldfish, flown in and brought in to fill the pond. There was a sushi bar, of course, and a little stage where traditional Japanese dance was done nightly. There was a bar in the back, and I guess a club, and I'm not old enough to remember the club, but apparently it was really popular in the 70s, and it was just the cool place to be.
You weren't old enough? Or is that just a story you're telling? I'm kidding. So, what was the reception like? What do your folks tell you about the reception like in the 60s and 70s for folks to be exposed to sushi? I mean, now it's at the grocery stores, but back then it was like, whoa,
Back then it was exotic. It was a discovery. It was something that people would go on an adventure, because there wasn't a place like this. And I mean, you couldn't build that place today even. Like no new restaurant has this. It was the Japanese way of building homes and setting up the frames. You don't use nails. Everything's done and cut in particular ways to make it all hold together. By the way, it didn't hold up well over time, but that's how it was originally done. And you go to Japan, you'll see construction still done that way in the traditional manner, but that's what it looked like. Of course, you can't build like that anymore in Houston. So it was a really, really magical experience.
What was it like for you growing up in that environment as a child?
gave hell to everybody else. I ran around because the space was really big and I was very, very little, and I would get lost in there, and I would play hide and seek with my grandmother, and try to grab little bits of food from the kitchen whenever I could. I would work as a cashier during summers, and I got paid a healthy wage of $1 nickel for every ticket I punched, I think.
But it was all the sushi you can eat.
All the sushi, you know what's funny? So I actually didn't eat sushi until I was a little bit older. I thought I didn't like sushi back then, as a little kid, 5 or 6 years old. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I was like, oh no, this stuff is actually pretty good.
What do you remember what the reception was like for your family, kind of growing up, being the first and really leaders in not just for Japanese Americans, but for Asian Americans as a whole in the Houston region? I mean, your family's influence is far beyond food. His late father, Glenn Gondo, founded the first Asian Republican organization. Then he founded an Asian Democrat organization because he wanted Asians to be politically involved, to lead. So tell us what that was like for you to kind of see how your family kind of really embraced Houston, and did Houston sort of embrace it back? Were there challenges? What do you remember about
Yeah.
this?
Well, I think today we all know that Houston is incredibly diverse. It's probably the most diverse city in the world. Back then it wasn't so diverse. And so for my parents, my grandparents, they stuck out. And my father used that, for him it wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. You would go into a meeting, go into a room, be the only Asian person there, and people would remember who he was. Not only that, not just because of how he looked, but because of how he spoke. It was very rare to see an Asian person back then